Hi, this is Jim from Safety Wars. Before we start the program, I want to make sure everyone understands that we often talk about OSHA and EPA citations, along with some other regulatory actions from other agencies, legal cases, and criminal activity. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Proposed fines are exactly that, and they are often litigated, reduced, or vacated. We use available public records, news accounts, and press releases. We cannot warranty or guarantee the details of any of the stories we share, since we are not directly involved with these stories, at least not most of the time. Enjoy the show.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Would help if I had a microphone here. From the border of liberty and prosperity in the highway of the north is Safety Wars for Tuesday, August 5th, 2025. So, 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, there was a implosion at the site of the Titanic. It was called the Submersible Titanic. Submersible Titan, Titan. CG 1788361 in the North Atlantic Ocean near the wreck of the site of the RMS Titanic, resulting in the loss of 5 lives on June 18th, 2023. Sad thing is that there were a lot of indicators way before this, according to the U.S. Coast Guard report, which was issued today. Might have been issued late last night, but everything picked it up today, and I found out about it today. So, which is our custom. I mean, you look at these, unless you're looking at something on like PBS or some kind of Discovery Channel, mega disaster thing, you're not going to find too many people going through the actual report with you. So we did this with the Alec Baldwin situation way back when, and we're doing it with this one. I imagine that if we I know that there's some litigation, but I imagine that if there were any survivors, if the owner of this thing survived, we'd be following this up for years. There's a lot to be learned here. And unfortunately, some of the scenarios that are outlined in this report, and it's like 375 pages, are not going to read all 375 pages line by line. I was in a meeting last week, and I went into, I had a similar thing. I said, do you want me to give a summary, or do you want me to go through this line by line? I said, summary. I said, okay, because this could go either way. So we're going to do this, and I'll have everything uploaded from yesterday's program on the video end, and we'll go from there. I mean, this is... we're going to be concentrating primarily on the safety management at the company that owned this. And so we've already covered some of this in our leadership training, where essentially the owner said, well, hey, you can't always be safe. You can't, you'll leave the home. You don't leave bed if you want to be totally safe, and we could do this, blah, blah, blah. A very cavalier quote that he had, in my opinion, right? And I know it's ill to talk of the dead, right? But we're going to do that. I mean, let me do a share screen. Allow. All right. So here we have, let's see if we could expand this a little bit more. Yeah, so here we are, full page mode. So we're going to go through, I have the pages marked where we're going to talk about this, and let's start with page 1 of the report, the executive summary. So here it is. The implosion, and this is for August 4th, 2025, which is yesterday. Implosion of the submersible Titan in the North Atlantic Ocean near the wreck site of the RMS Titanic, resulting in the loss of 5 lives. 5 people died when the commercial submersible Titan imploded on June 18, 2023, in what is considered to be a preventable tragedy. The U.S. Coast Guard's Marine Board of Investigation into the fatal incident found that OceanGate, who owned this thing, OceanGate's failure to follow established engineering protocols for safety testing and maintenance of their submersible was the primary causal factor. The investigation further identified the need for proper corporate governance, a professional workplace culture, and improved regulatory oversight, in particular for novel, by the way, novel means new, vessel designs and operations. For several years preceding the incident, OceanGate leveraged intimidation tactics. Sound familiar, guys? Allowances for scientific operations and the company's favorable reputation to evade regulatory scrutiny. By strategically creating and exploiting regulatory confusion and oversight challenges, OceanGate was ultimately able to operate Titan completely outside of the established deep-sea protocols, which had historically contributed to a strong safety record for commercial submersibles. The lack of both third-party oversight and experienced OceanGate employees on staff during the 2023 Titan operations allowed OceanGate's chief executive officer to completely ignore vital inspections, data analysis, and preventative maintenance procedures, culminating in a catastrophic event. I don't know. Sounds pretty familiar to me. Does that sound familiar to anybody here? I don't know. We'll see. Let me make sure I have the right sound here. Yes, we have the right sound setting. I'd hate to have to do this twice. I don't like doing things twice. So that's just like the first two paragraphs here. Does this sound familiar to you? You have, right, so let's take this outside of OceanGate. You're working for a contractor, you're working for a company, and they say, you know what, we have to have a safety professional on staff, or we have to have someone there to manage safety. So we're going to go and we're going to have a safety professional that's not experienced, a safety professional that maybe is new to this, a safety professional that is going to be a donuts and coffee type of safety professional, maybe not donuts, maybe bagels. Choose your poison. And no, what does that mean? They're going to be sitting around eating donuts and coffee all day, right? Or are we going to have somebody who's actually a team member with that? Sound familiar? How about the Rust situation with Alec Baldwin? Well, what do you mean? They told Hannah Gutierrez-Reed that not to do her job. If they had a qualified safety professional here, would the person have been able to have a strong enough personality to stand up to the chief executive officer here of that? Now, like all good accident reports, right? And we may not get through this in one program, by the way. Like all good accident reports, you now have a timeline here built into this. And, right, and it goes down, and then a small, right, dive crew, and it goes down, and we all know what happened. They go on the thing, and the thing implodes once it hits a certain depth on that. And boom, 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 going through here. Following the implosion, the 5 individuals were exposed to approximately 4,930 psi pounds per square inch of water pressure, resulting in the instantaneous death of all 5 occupants. The primary causal factors that directly contributed to the casualty include OceanGate's design and testing processes for Titan did not adequately address many of the fundamental engineering principles that would be crucial for constructing a hull to the precision necessary for the intended operations in an inherently hazardous environment. OceanGate did not ensure an analysis was conducted to understand the expected cycle life of Titan's hull. OceanGate's excessive reliance on a real-time monitoring system to assess the condition of Titan's carbon fiber hull, and then their failure to conduct a meaningful analysis of the data provided by the system. OceanGate's continued use of the Titan after a series of incidents that compromised the integrity of the hull and other critical components of the submersible without properly assessing or inspecting the hull. Number 5. The Titan's carbon fiber hull design and construction in terms of winding, right? So carbon fiber has to be wound, curing, gluing, thickness of the hull, and manufactured standards introduce flaws that weaken the overall structural integrity of the Titan hull. Number 6, OceanGate's failure to conduct a detailed investigation after the Titan experienced mishaps that negatively impacted its hull and components during dives conducted prior to the incident. OceanGate's number 7 we're on should sound familiar. OceanGate's toxic workplace environment, which used firings of senior staff members and the looming threat of being fired to dissuade employees and contractors from expressing safety concerns. Again, they didn't have a safety professional here, but if you are a safety professional here, have you been intimidated at work? By the way, if you're an actual employee and not a contractor, that is a whistleblower violation under OSHA's whistleblower laws. With that, yeah. There's a little bit of a process, a little bit more complicated than that, but not much more. Number 8. OceanGate's failure to conduct preventative maintenance on the Titan's hull or protect it from the elements during extended off-season layup period ahead of the 2023 Titanic expedition. Other contributing causal factors include 1. OceanGate's safety culture and operational practices were critically flawed, and at the core of these failures were glaring disparities between their written safety programs or protocols and their actual practices. Has that ever happened? I had a conversation with someone last week, and it's practice and policy. I have to thank Mark Matthews, one of my friends, who taught me that about 20 years ago. Said, Jimmy, there's a difference when a corporation puts out practice and what their policy is. Because during we were involved in an accident investigation, and he said, I'm not interested, and much more experienced than me at that point. I'm not interested in what the policy is. We know what the policy is. The policy is this. We're interested in what the practice was and what actually happened, not what should have happened. Right with that. So you write something that says one thing and you do another with that. Also known as work as planned and work as done. Number 2, OceanGate Chief Executive Officer's sustained efforts to misrepresent Titan as indestructible. Sound familiar? Due to unconfirmed safety margins and alleged conformance with advanced engineering principles, provided a false sense of security for passengers and regulators. So in other words, the regulators couldn't tell that they were being lied to. OceanGate senior leaders fostered an organizational culture that allowed mounting financial shortfalls, right? Didn't have enough money. Safety fourth. This is safety fourth thinking. You got to get the job. You got to do the job. You got to get paid for the job and be financially solvent. Then we worry about safety. The safety fourth. I don't know of a better example of safety fourth. Right. OceanGate senior leaders foster an organizational culture that allow mounting financial shortfalls, customer expectations, and operational demands to be prioritized over the mission director's authorities and responsibilities for each Titanic dive. And number 4, the lack of comprehensive and effective regulations for the oversight and operation of manned submersibles and vessels of novel design, meaning new design, that are constructed and or operated in the United States and its navigable waters. The investigation also determined that the absence of a timely OSHA investigation into a 2018 OceanGate whistleblower's complaint, combined with a lack of effective communication and coordination between OSHA, the U.S. Coast Guard regarding Seamen's Protection Act protocols, was a missed opportunity for potential early government intervention ahead of OceanGate's planned testing of the first Titan hull. Early intervention may have resulted in the OceanGate pursuing regulatory compliance or abandoning their plans for Titanic expeditions. I don't think so. I'm sorry, I don't think so. Not when you have a strong personality like that running things. Right? And again, the lure of everything, right? So, and this is like the opening credits here, right? Here, with this, that's the... I'm sorry, let me go back to the screen. That is the submersible there. With that, right? This is one of the ways around the, apparently around the regulations. Not registered or not documented with any flag, administration, or state authority. We don't need no stinking regulations here, right? And these are the people here, right? 5 people, I'm sorry. We have Richard Stockton Rush the third. Right, he was the person in charge. Paul Henry Nargiolet Shahazada Daywood Suleiman Daywood and Hamish Harding. Rest in peace, everyone. All right, so here we have, again, one of the things that's in here is a passenger/mission specialist. Apparently, you can get around some laws if you call them a mission specialist. Sort of like when you what's an astronaut? Technically, all these people on these passenger rides out of outer space are astronauts. With that, and along with some people with high altitude airplanes, could be considered that. OceanGate Expedition advertised missions for the submersible Titan to experience a rear view of legendary Royal Mail steamer Titanic wreck site. The OceanGate Expeditions promoted missions as a longitudinal study to collect images, videos, and laser and sonar data to determine assessment of the rate of decay of the Titanic. This is how it was marketed. The 2023 Titanic expedition was advertised as 5 separate missions, each lasting 8 to 10 days. Passengers were provided with the opportunity to act as mission specialists, whose training and fees supported the mission. The missions would depart St. John's, Newfoundland, and Labrador, Canada, St. John's, aboard a support vessel for the 370 nautical mile transit to Titanic website. It goes on and on and on. So there is a map there. Again, this is all from the Coast Guard, so this is, I'm just reading the report. And it goes on and on. So our next, we're going to get to the meat of the health and safety stuff here. And we're going to scroll on down. And let me go to this view. We're going to scroll on down. I mean, they have all different engineering reports and everything in here. I mean, if you're into that, right? If you're into that, that's why I said we may do another program here. If you're into that, I mean, this is a whole bunch of stuff. This is going to be, and this is a case study. But what do we talk about on this program mostly is safety management, right? And how do we run organizations here? So what are we looking at? Page 287. Right, that's when the real meat starts here. Hold on. Good thing I have this on my view. You get to see me. I tell you what, some of the promos we have coming up, you're gonna love for this. And you can join us on Facebook at Safety Wars or James Posel or JCP Technical Services, and you could, and also on Rumble at JCP Technical Services. I tell you what, when we talk about politics here, with some of this stuff coming out, wow. Okay. So here we have number one. They talk about all the engineering stuff here, right? Which is the problem. I'll summarize it. Problems with it that should have been investigated. All different engineering issues here. Here you have 5.10. We're on page 287. Circumvention of U.S. laws and international standards. OceanGate's co-founder, who departed the company in 2013, initially envisioned that the company would create a fleet of 4 or 5 deep diving submersibles capable of carrying 5 people, available for charter anywhere in the world without a dedicated mothership. The goal was to increase accessibility to deep oceans for an industry that had been traditionally limited by high costs and the challenge of mobilizing the proper support infrastructure to remote dive sites. Early on, OceanGate did not plan to build its own submersibles. However, OceanGate was unable to find a company that could build a submersible tailored to their business needs, including the ability to carry 5 people to depths of 6,000 meters without requiring a dedicated full-time support vessel. OceanGate's initial steps involved purchasing 2 used submersibles, registered in Washington State. The OceanGate did not pursue USGC certification for inspection for the 2 vessels, and after initially expressing interest with U.S. Coast Guard Sector Puget Sound about getting the vessels certificated. Never heard of that word. Certificated as a small passenger vessel. The co-founder confirmed OceanGate understood the U.S. Coast Guard's regulations regarding small passenger vessels. They also acknowledged that both vessels could not operate as small passenger vessels under OceanGate's planned business model due to strict federal laws and regulations. But specifically, it was confirmed by several former OceanGate employees that OceanGate intended to operate at depths well beyond 150 feet, which is currently the maximum operational depth the U.S. Coast Guard allows for its inspected fleet of small passenger submersibles. However, OceanGate knew that ORVs could carry a pilot, crew, and researchers by simply requesting a letter of designation with minimal U.S. Coast Guard oversight. So basically, they said we cannot have passengers, but we can have researchers, so therefore, let's go that way. Does that sound familiar? How many times have we been on construction sites where people say, oh, yeah, I went through this not too long ago. Oh, yeah, I've been doing this thing for many years. Oh, yeah, I had OSHA outreach training. Oh, can you produce that? Well, I went through 40-hour HAZWOPER training. Doesn't that count? No, it's not OSHA outreach training. Yeah, but we had, all that training. We know what we're doing. Sound familiar? In my career of 33 years, I must have heard that or similar situations about 1,000 times. And I wouldn't be, I would not, that's not hyperbole there. I know what I'm doing. I have a certificate, and it goes the other way. Or I know what I've been doing this for 35 years, and it's obvious that, no, I've been doing this for 35 years. I know what I'm doing. And the person is like 30 years old. Oh, yeah, that happens. Right? So, again, in 2011, OceanGate moved its operation to San Francisco's OCMI zone, where they requested and received an ORV letter of designation for one of the vessels that the vessel completed 34 dives over 30 days in Monterey Bay. And again, they went through all of this in here. Right? Citizen scientists, a term the company used for their paying passengers whom they regarded as scientific personnel. As the co-founder explained during the interview, this model attracts diverse clientele, all of whom possess some financial resources, as participation comes with significant costs, ranging up to $40,000 per person, depending on the mission's duration and complexity. Wow, this is right going on and on and on. Over time, OceanGate's CEO changed the term used for their ORV passengers from citizen scientists to mission specialists, borrowing the term from the space industry. Mission specialist is not formally defined in the U.S. Coast Guard regulations and is rarely used in maritime domain. Each mission specialist wore the submersibles paid either OceanGate Expeditions, OceanGate Foundation, or Argus Expeditions to participate in a dive. The payments meet the definition of consideration under U.S. law, which makes OceanGate's mission specialists passengers for hire, regardless of OceanGate's labeling. In my father's vocabulary, they're trying to be cute. All right, so the fact that they have to pay to go there means that they are, in effect, passengers. Right? OceanGate also started funneling mission specialist payments through the OceanGate Foundation, a strategy designed to bypass passenger for hire regulations, since the payments for dive, man, they gotta rewrite this. Since the payments for the operations went to a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and as my wife has correctly said, nonprofit only is a tax status. There is no nonprofit. They're all for profit, but it's a tax status. As OceanGate transitioned the two vessels operations in 2015, OceanGate did not contact Sector Houston Galveston OCMI to obtain an ORV letter of designation prior to conducting domestic dive operations. This is most likely due to previous Coast Guard restrictions placed on one of the vessels. The carriage of scientific personnel for consideration was only permitted with a valid ORV letter of designation under federal regulations, and the vessels did not attain one during its initial 3 years of operations within 4 different OCMI zones. Very interesting here. All right. And here you go. On such missions, Cyclops 1 was one of the vessels conducted without a valid ORV letter of designation in May 2016, involved a dive excursion on the Andrea Doria wreck site off the coast of Nantucket, Massachusetts. Evidence of this dive and the compensation provided by one of his first confirmed passenger was highlighted in the following excerpt from a December 2015 letter from Mr. Rush to OceanGate stakeholders. Quote, on a very positive note, the first potential client we contacted has committed to the $20,000 fee to join us for 2 days, including just 1 3-hour dive, and also has secured 2 more individuals at $20,000 each, despite our lack of significant supporting information. The Andrea Doria expedition, which departed Boston on June 2nd, 2016, and returned on June 9th, 2016, included paying participants who were described as mission specialists, even though the Cyclops 1 did not have a valid ORV letter of designation, right? from the sector, Boston OCMI, or a certificate of inspection from the USCGS to operate as a small submersible. And it goes on and on here. Multiple operations on one of the vessels here. Here we had their Titans. That's the one that they had the issue on. During Titan's design, construction, and testing processes, OceanGate did not contact Sector Puget Sound to apply for a certificate of inspection or request an ORV designation letter for the original or final Titan hull. They also failed to register or document both Titan hulls with any state or country, including the U.S., making both hulls stateless vessels under international standards. However, the Titan hulls are still vessels of the United States subject to U.S. laws and federal regulations. Specifically, 18 U.S.C. Title IX defines a vessel of the United States as a vessel belonging in whole or in part to the United States or any citizen thereof, or any corporation created by or under the laws of the United States, or of any state, territory, district, or possession thereof. So just because you're an American citizen, you own this thing, it's a U.S. vessel. Real simple. According to this, the first and final Titan hulls collectively conducted 26 documented dives in Washington state waters, which required the hulls to be registered according to Washington state law. OceanGate's former legal representative, in what appears to have been a deceptive claim intended to demonstrate Titan's legitimacy for Titanic dives, asserted in a 2021 letter to the EDVA that Titan was a Bahamian registered crude submersible. The statement was false because OceanGate, after being informed of the Bahamian registration requirements by the BMA, I'm sorry with all the acronyms, in 2019, abandoned attempts to register the Titan hulls there, likely because BMA required registered submersible to design and construct it to be designed. Someone's got to proofread this stuff. This is all AI, dude. To be designed and constructed in accordance with IMO, MSC, blah, 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 or similar standards. Right? So they abandoned it on there. The USGS Reserve Boarding Officer testified during the MBI hearing that Mr. Rush responded that he planned to register the Titan in the Bahamas and operate in international waters to avoid USCG jurisdiction. The USCG Reserve Board officer also testified to that Mr. Rush stated if he was ever confronted by USCG, he would buy a congressman. Mr. Rush's response demonstrates that he was aware that his operations were outside regulatory compliance. Have you ever had anybody tell you that? Right? It comes in different forms. Anything happens, I'm just going to buy off OSHA. There were reports all through the years, can't substantiate them, that there was one particular OSHA area office where that used to happen all the time. Right? I'm not going to mention where. So, there were reports. I'll say that. Oh, what? We're going to have a problem with that? Why do you think I delivered donuts around the Christmas? I go, I have these fancy pastries brought in from wherever. Oh, yeah, that happens. That's why you can't, today working on a federal project, you can't give these people anything. They're not even allowed to, take coffee from you under some rubrics, right? Can't even get coffee, right? OceanGate was clearly aware of the compliance challenges it faced at the classification of states and goes on and on and on. So let's just say, right, that all different types of regulatory holes, right, in here, and deception. In a 2021 interview with CBS, Mr. Rush confirmed OceanGate's approach by declaring, "I'd like to be remembered as an innovator. I think it was General Douglas MacArthur who said, 'You're remembered for the rules you break,' and I've broken some rules to make this." Yeah, and you have blood of 4 other people on your hands, too. All right? I'm sorry. That's the way it is. Now, we're in section 511. What page are we on? 293. All right. Weak regulatory framework for domestic and international submersibles operations and lack of submersible expertise. In other words, there are weak regulations and people who didn't know what they were doing. When does that happen on our jobs, right? Happens a lot. You hear about this, right? So I don't work at jobs like this. 296. Nah, I don't. No. I stopped working at places like that. I won't even take them on as a client. Ocean Gate's operational and safety practices were critically flawed. This is Ocean Gate's toxic safety culture. This is relevant to us, folks. At the core of these failures was a disconnect between the company's stated safety protocols and its actual practices. While Ocean Gate's 155 HSE manual was ostensibly intended to guide high-risk operations, its substance and practical application were woefully inadequate. Only 4 pages of the HSE manual address dive-specific safety procedures, a substantial shortfall for a company centered on deep-sea manned submersible operations. This highlighted systemic issues where submersible safety protocols are either egregiously inadequate or willfully disregarded, leaving critical risks unmitigated. The analysis reveals a disturbing pattern of misrepresentation and reckless disregard for safety in the Ocean Gate's operation of the Titan Submersible, with Mr. Rush seemingly using inflated numbers to bolster the perceived safety and dive count. Right? Oh, I've done this a million times, never had a problem. That's what that is. The beauty of reports like this is that you can borrow some of this thing. The analysis reveals a disturbing pattern of misrepresentation and reckless disregard. Wow. Right, and it goes into some technical details here. The limited testing of the final Titan hull directly contradicts any claims of rigorous validation. A mere 11 operational dives to shallow depths is woefully inadequate to assess the structural integrity and long-term performance of a submersible designed for extreme pressures at titanic depths, raising serious questions about Ocean Gate's adherence to established engineering practices. Compounding these issues, the company's leadership structure concentrated virtually all decision-making power in the hands of its CEO, Mr. Rush. Although Ocean Gate had a board of directors, Mr. Rush's dominant behavior rendered it largely ineffective. MBI witnesses described the board meetings as informational, with Mr. Rush showcasing accomplishments and dictating decisions. So this is the over-reliance on heroic measures of one person, which is traditional safety. So you need to have, if you want to build a safety culture, it has to be diverse, true diversity, which is intellectually diverse, different points of view, different experiences, different expertise with that, which is the true diversity that we should be promoting. Here we had one man in charge with a very dominant personality. Right, MBI witnesses describe board meetings and its information with Mr. Rush showcasing accomplishments and dictating decisions. The MBI determined the Ocean Gate's board of directors, despite the appearance of diverse expertise and practice, functioned primarily as a figurehead to add credibility to Ocean Gate's operations. The inclusion of a retired Coast Guard admiral to help ensure their regulatory compliance was disingenuous, as the retired admiral confirmed during an MBI interview that he that's a Marine Board of Inquiry, right, interview, that he had no marine safety background or expertise when he was added to the board. The retired the Coast Guard Admiral couched the board's role as strategic-based, and he confirmed that Mr. Rush was not a person who sought, to the best of my recollection, this is a quote, a lot of input from the members of the board or direction. It was mostly from Stockton. This is the plan, that this is the way we're going, and the board would discuss, that's Stockton Rush, right? The board would discuss, question, comment on, let's say, the way ahead. Overall, the MBI believes Mr. Rush deliberately sidelined OceanGate's board and did not solicit its collective expertise so he could proceed unchecked with his vision to conduct Titanic expeditions regardless of any mounting safety concerns. This style of top-down leadership, which was displayed during all OceanGate operations investigated by the MBI, fostered a culture in which operational objectives consistently overruled safety priorities. Employees, particularly in technical and operational roles, were dissuaded from and belittled for voicing concerns, creating an environment where safety was sidelined and concerned employees are either resigned or were terminated. A prime example of Mr. Rush's disregard for opposing views from his senior staff was evidenced during his meeting with his Director of Operations on January 19, 2018, following an internal safety inspection of the first Titan hull conducted by the Director of Operations. After the Director of Operations made the point that OceanGate had hired him to take a conservative approach to safety, Mr. Rush made the following statement to the group assembled for the meeting. Quote, that's why we hired the Director of Operations, you know. It is for that level of detail and safety approach to it was the primary attraction to bringing the Director of Operations on board. And now we've gotten to a point where his experience and his estimation of the correct way to do it is fundamentally opposite of the approach that I want to take. You could not, I'm going to tell you what, you could not make this up. Holy Louvno. I can't believe it. Let me read that again. That's why we hired the Director of Operations, you know. It is for that level of detail and safety approach to it was the primary attraction to bringing the Director of Operations. So we hired him because of his level of detail. And now we've gotten to a point where his experience and his estimation of the correct way to do is fundamentally opposite of the approach that I want to take. Earlier in the conversation, Mr. Rush also made the statement that he would not force people to join his religion if they were opposed and held opposite views. When considering the Director of Operations was fired shortly after the meeting with Mr. Rush, the message was clear to OceanGate's remaining senior staff that opposing views needed to be completely stifled. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? I tell you what, we're on this bridge. You're being a pain in the ass with the fall protection, requiring us to wear fall protection. We got all this other crap. Someone falls off the bridge. No, and therefore, because you're a pain in the ass, you're getting fired. Get the hell out of here, pick up your stuff, and get out. The guy falls down off the bridge. Right, a short time thereafter. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Here. The MBI noticed that many of OceanGate's engineers lacked the specialized knowledge for designing deep-sea submersibles, leading to significant capability and knowledge gaps. A former OceanGate director of engineering described the building and operation of the first Titan hull as akin to a high school project, underscoring the inadequacies of the team's skills and experience. Despite these shortcomings, engineers were pressured by Mr. Rush to meet ambitious deadlines, often at the expense of addressing critical design and engineering flaws. This prioritization of the operational dive schedule left the dive support teams and Titan Submersible ill-prepared to sustain safe operations in the extreme deep sea conditions. This lack of expertise within OceanGate's engineering team was a concern that compounded over time as OceanGate employees were submersible and engineering expertise either left the company voluntarily or were fired by Mr. Rush. Example of OceanGate CEO's disdain for traditional submersible safety protocols were abundant. For example, in one incident, Mr. Rush opted to use only 4 bolts to secure Titan's 3,500-pound forward dome to the submersible because it took less time, despite the design requiring 18 bolts. The director of engineering at the time raised concerns over the reduced bolts and was ignored. This shortcut became an issue during the 2021 dive while being hoisted to the Horizon Arctic's aft deck. The Titan suffered a catastrophic failure. The forward dome's bolts sheared as it transitioned from the ramp to the horizontal surface, causing the dome to detach and fall onto the platform. But of course, nobody was injured. This incident, right? So it wasn't a problem. I'm adding that, but it says something different, but that's basically it. The dismissive approach to safety culture was not limited to engineering decisions. OceanGate's management actively retaliated against employees who raised legitimate compliance-related concerns. In 2017, a U.S. Coast Guard Reserve petty officer employed by OceanGate warned the company's front office about regulatory noncompliance. Mr. Rush reportedly responded to concerns with hostility, and the U.S. Coast Guard petty officer claimed Mr. Rush told him he could buy a congressman, quote unquote, if the U.S. Coast Guard ever became a problem for his Titan operations. In 2022, a contractor hired by OceanGate raised safety concerns about the navigation system, the way the navigation system was being utilized to track and communicate with the Titan. By the way, I looked up today what the definition of utilize was because I was reading a document that had utilize. You know what utilize means? Utilize means to use in an unintended purpose or questionable purpose. So, again, words mean things. It was being utilized, meaning it was being used improperly to track and communicate with the Titan. Specifically, concerns were raised regarding the constant errors with the Titan's tracking and navigation system, which stemmed from OceanGate's decision to use Titan's tracking system as their sole communication, again, single point failure, capability with Titan's communication and tracking team. The same contractor brought up the concerns raised by mission specialists after they heard a loud bang inside Titan while ascending close to the surface from Dive 80. When the contractor voiced their numerous safety concerns to an OceanGate director, the director told the contractor, "You have a bad attitude. You don't have an explorer mindset, you know. We're innovative, and we're cowboys, and a lot of people can't handle that." The contractor voiced these concerns was subsequently sent home prior to the expiration of her contract. The employee firing sent a clear message at raising legitimate safety concerns, as encouraged in an excerpt from OceanGate's ASC included in Figure 273, was not only unwelcome by OceanGate in practice, but often led to the employee's termination. Thus, OceanGate's employees felt that raising concerns could jeopardize their potential careers at OceanGate and in the broader submersible industry if they became labeled as a problematic employee. It's probably a small industry, so that's probably a legitimate concern by the employees there. Here it is. Employees are required to comply with all company safety rules or are encouraged to actively participate in identifying ways to make our company a safer place to work. Maybe not so much. Financial instability further compounded OceanGate's challenges, introducing additional risks and pressures. Again, this is safety forward thinking, right? To an already insolvent and unsustainable business model. Witnesses described the high turnover rate of employees, with full-time staff being replaced by contractors and volunteers as financial pressures mounted. By 2023, OceanGate resorted to asking employees to temporarily forego their salaries in exchange for future repayment. The former director of engineering who left OceanGate early in 2023 testified in the Marine Board of Inquiry that these economic pressures severely undermine the already low safety standards at OceanGate. Safety fourth. The safety was being compromised way too much, the director of engineering stated to the MBI, while reflecting on the growing tension between the company's financial struggles and its operational obligations to mission specialists who often paid years in advance for their chance at a Titan dive to the Titan wreck. So he was running a little bit of a Ponzi scheme here, or a pyramid scheme of some sort. As these systemic failures escalated, OceanGate's management remained unyielding and increased their disregard for safety. Decisions were made unilaterally from the top, with Mr. Rush often bypassing established protocols and ignoring the concerns of other experienced OceanGate employees and contractors. Several OceanGate employees confirmed that Mr. Rush was essentially OceanGate's CEO, safety officer, and a primary submersible pilot, which enabled him to set operational safety parameters and then make all final decisions for Titan operations without adequate input or checks and balances from the board of directors and other OceanGate employees, regulators, or third-party organizations. The cumulative effect was an authoritarian and toxic culture where safety was not only deprioritized but actively suppressed. This toxic environment, characterized by retaliation and belittling against those who express safety concerns, combined with a lack of external oversight, set the stage for the Titan's ultimate demise. Had OceanGate adhered to the safety standards outlined in its own HSE manual and fostered a culture of transparency and accountability, this tragedy would likely have been averted with the final Titan hull removed from service well ahead of its implosion. Encouraging employees to voice concerns without fear of retaliation, prioritizing safety over expediency, could have prevented the sequence of events that led to the disaster. Instead, the company's systemic failures created an environment where risks were ignored and consequences were inevitable. Again, great things, right? Remember that. I'm writing that down right now. Great thing. Right? With this. And that's what we have. We're at 52 minutes into this. Let's see, how much more are we going to get going here? There's a lot of news out there we could cover, but this was like, right? Next section is very extensive, but we're not going to go into all of it here. But it looks like we're going to go into hour 2. Undermining authority and overriding established hierarchy, 5.13. The safety of the Titan submersible operations was a critical concern given the extreme depths. According to OceanGate's HSE manual, the mission director was responsible for monitoring, directing, modifying, and potentially canceling a dive operation when it was determined that an unsafe condition existed. The mission director was also responsible for ensuring all pre-dive checks were completed for all procedures and equipment prior to commencing a dive. As OceanGate's key decision-maker, Mr. Rush cultivated an environment where safety concerns of the mission director were often dismissed, diminished, or overruled, leading to numerous hazardous situations during OceanGate's dive excursions. These incidents exposed significant gaps in the planning, execution, and safety oversight during the OceanGate operations. However, OceanGate's leadership, particularly Mr. Rush, fostered an organizational culture that increased operational risks, where financial pressures, operational demands, and a disregard for safety measures overshadowed the mission director's duties. It goes on, giving some examples here, right? All the way through here. I tell you what, this is right. 5.14, page 302. The absence of a designated director of safety management and risks. The investigation into OceanGate's safety risk assessment processes revealed several critical deficiencies that compromised the safety of their operations, particularly during expeditions to the Titanic wreck site. One of the most significant issues is the absence of a director of safety. The role of the director of safety is clearly outlined in the manual, specifically, and it goes on, blah, 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 right? And employees indicated that they consider Mr. Rush to be the default safety officer. This lack of a dedicated safety director of safety meant there was not a designated individual accountable for overseeing the safety program, leading to a breakdown in safety oversight. Instead, the mission director was responsible for the dives and safety for each mission. How often does that happen with a large work crew? Yeah, I'm the foreman. I'm also handling safety. Or, you know what? That guy who's here for the summer on the summer crew, he's a safety guy or safety person. Usually it's men who do this, but, women wouldn't do this. I'm sorry. That's my experience. With that, and I'm sticking with it. Instead, the mission director was responsible for everything, right? However, the mission director who reported directly to Miss Rush was frequently overruled by the pilot on submersible-related safety issues, creating confusion in decentralized safety structure that lacked clear lines of authority and responsibility. In other words, no one's responsible. In terms of risk management, OceanGate used a system that involved the risk index, which considered anomalies and strikes to assess unusual events that could impact dive decisions. The risk index considered factors such as crew health, crew experience, and equipment condition. When deviations from the perfect situation occurred, each deviation was supposed to be counted as an anomaly, with multiple anomalies being equivalent as a strike. A strike was defined in the HSE manual as a significant safety issue, and if 3 strikes were identified, then the dive was to be canceled. The MBI found no instance where an OceanGate dive was canceled due to accumulated anomalies or strikes. Right? And it goes on and on. Basically, no clear evidence to suggest that this system was properly applied, and there was no documentation on about how the risk index for each dive was calculated. Also, former OceanGate employees and others interviewed were unaware of how the risk index was calculated and left the assessments completely up to Mr. Rush. Right, going on. Basically, he was responsible for everything. There's no documentation. Nobody knows how he got to this place with the decision, and it goes on and on and on. So, we're going to cut it right there. That's hour 1. For our Safety FM family, we're going to go to our outro, and then we are going to wrap things up there. So, we'll see you in the next hour.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.